So let's get this podcast started. Do you know who the wealthiest drummer in the world is?
Travis Barker.
No, it is Ringo Starr. As of
okay.
2020, he was worth $350 million.
300. That's it.
That's it. So don't be a drummer. Is the lesson there?
Yeah. Don't let your mom ever tell you that you can't make a living doing drums. But that's unicorn status right there. So
yeah, he's a one of one for sure.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about drums. We're going to talk about drummers. Who are some of your biggest influences or like favorite drummers?
I mean, starting off, it was Metallica. Even with like learning guitar, because me and my friends back in the day, we used to like play guitar and drums, or we would try. We'd all kind of like hop off, like someone would play drums, someone would play guitar. So those were kind of like my first learning of drums, or like Korn, stuff like that. Like pretty simple stuff that's just more groove based. I mean, Metallica is a little bit more of kind of like the more upbeat, thrashy sort of, a little bit of double bass here and there sort of stuff. But just, learning that kind of thing. As I got older, I started really getting into Dream Theater and Mike Portnoy, just because all the like the cool rhythmic syncopated stuff, or like odd time grooves. I always like, when you hear that, you like just like, you're just like, what is going on with that? It's just like, because I wanted to be a drummer actually before guitar.
Okay.
I've probably talked about this on the podcast before, but I actually wanted a drum set first because a friend of mine in high school had a guitar. So I was like, well, maybe if I can get drums, we could start a band, right? So I couldn't get a drum set, didn't have room for it, but I came across a friend who was selling a guitar, and but I always kind of in the back of my head, like, it'd be cool to be.
You wish you were a drummer a little bit.
I wish I was a drummer. Yeah, my guitar. It's like when you hear like Alan Holdsworth, he's like, he wanted to be a saxophone player, but he could only get a guitar, and then he's spending his whole life making the guitar sound like a saxophone.
Right.
But I'm not sitting trying to make my guitar sound like drummer, like.
No.
But
well, we can't talk about rock drumming without talking about Ringo Starr.
Ringo.
So I think at the time he was like a phenomenon, and like they were such a style setter and a genre bender, and like everyone was playing swing, like the hi-hats or the ride. Everyone was and then he came in and was just playing straight eighths. And everyone was like, what is this?
This dude's rocking it.
Yeah. And surprise, we have rock.
Well, it's like when when you're thinking about drummers, especially drummers from back in the day, like you think dudes like Buddy Rich, who even metal drummers like Buddy Rich, especially because he would do like the kind of like in metal, they call it gravity blast, where it's just like a single-handed roll, like taka 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 taka, where it kind of rebounds.
Okay.
And and like, you got guys like Buddy Rich who like back in the day were just like destroying everybody years and years ago. So that's doesn't surprise me that someone like Ringo Starr, like even the Beatles in general were, I think, always kind of pushing the boundaries and like experimenting. And for as much as they've written so many like classic songs, like they were definitely one of those bands that were always doing something different, changing the game in some way.
Yeah, pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
Love them or hate them, they changed everything.
Yeah. I know some people that hate them.
Yeah.
Every time the Beatles come up, they're just like, oh.
Skip.
It's like me with Led Zeppelin. I'm like, oh, I don't want to hear about Led Zeppelin.
Wow. That's a hot take.
Yeah.
One of my favorite drummers is Steve Jordan. And I found out about him through the John Mayer trio, which is just absolutely disgusting, like blues rock music.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've seen some live DVDs of like his more like bluesy side stuff. And yeah, all those dudes get down.
It's spicy.
Yeah.
And Steve Jordan played with just an incredible number of artists, like big name artists, Eric Clapton, that kind of thing. And so one tip I have, if you're trying to learn the drums, is to look up touring drummers and studio drummers. These are people who don't have like a household name necessarily, like they're not Phil Collins or Travis Barker, but these are people who are just absolutely locked into the beat and are very musical players, and everything they do is gold. So you'll see them on like so many records, like they'll play just hundreds and hundreds of albums, and then they'll go on tour with these people, and they just kind of sit back. They're not in the limelight, but they're just making music.
There's always in some kind of project, and
Yep.
recording and stuff. Did you ever get into like gospel drumming?
Um,
Like dudes like Eric Moore or even I think Tony Royster Jr. Like I don't know. Have you ever heard of Tony Royster Jr. actually? Now that
no.
dude, he was like a child prodigy. I
Okay.
remember years ago seeing this drum solo he did where I think he was like 11 or 12, maybe even younger, and he was just destroying it. And he like I think he plays for like Jay-Z now or something, or like some big hip hop artist.
Crazy.
So it was like one of those guys that you're just like, this kid's gonna do something
Yeah.
big because he's just too good. Like I'm like, unless he just one day says like, I don't want to play drums anymore. But it wasn't a surprise at all to see that he ended up, playing for some really big artists. But yeah, gospel drummers, man, like for anyone who's listening who are like wanting to find some drummers that'll blow your mind, just go on YouTube and type up gospel chops, and like you'll just see these guys who just like they call it like shedding. Like they'll be in a room with a bunch of drummers, and they'll just be like kind of like improvising and playing beats and going off and like passing it over, like a lot of linear stuff, which is really cool. It's like we're basically like no two drum hits hit at the same time.
Right.
So like it almost seems very like rudiments. So like if you have like right, left, kick, or something. So instead of, but you could like ta 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 do do ta 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 do do. You could do that where it's like both are on your feet, but then eventually like start to spread it out. So you could be like snare, tom, do do, like and like you could basically just like take those things and just spread all those different notes across the drum kit and just get some like stuff that makes you sound like way more of a badass than maybe you probably are, just because it's just like so cool. Because I mean you could just you could play fast. I mean most people think with like crazy drumming it's like fast,
Yeah.
but it's like when you're moving around the kit and like doing like stuff that sounds way more intricate than it maybe really is. Like there's this dude on YouTube named I think Mike Johnston.
He's a teacher.
He's a drum teacher.
Yeah, I
and
watch him.
and he does such a great job of like taking these types of concepts and making them very easily digestible. So like if you're even like wanting to learn drums, I would check that guy out. And he just has a great way of communicating like simple ideas. But then when you hear him like put it into action, something like that, like because I first heard about him from a friend of mine who was getting into drumming, and he was all into like linear drumming and like gospel type stuff. And yeah, it's like really some really cool ideas that you can take that are super simple and kind of go crazy with.
Yeah, I like really understated drumming for the most part. So one of my favorite drummers right now is Anderson Paak, and he's a singing drummer, rapping drummer. And his stuff is like, it seems simple on the surface, but then when you get behind a drum set and you try to play it, it's like, wow, this dude is doing so much underneath. Like it's just, it's crazy. And so like that kind of stuff is really impressive to me when you're not trying to just fill everything, like every moment with drum fills, but you're playing like very musically. And another drummer who does that is Perrin Moss, and he plays in a band called Hiatus Coyote. They're Australian 4-piece, and they're like neo soul stuff, but he makes the drums like a very musical instrument that's kind of going back and forth with the others. So that kind of stuff is really cool. But Travis Barker is an all-time influence for me, and like I hate to say that because of how stereotypical it is, but in high school his drumming influenced all of the bands I listened to. I wasn't like a huge Blink fan, but it just like spilled over from his influence into the stuff I listened to. And so I ended up trying to play all kinds of stuff that is basically stealing from him.
Yeah. So did you start, because I know you got a drum set right next to you in that room still, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Like, did you start learning drums after guitar or before?
It was around the same time that we got a drum set. Like I got my first guitar, and then we got a drum set, like a cheap garage sale drum set, and I was trying to convince my brother to play it. So I ended up playing on the drums whenever I wasn't playing guitar, basically. And I never had any drum lessons, and I'm a drum tourist, but my basic like best way to learn is just to play along with your favorite music.
Yep. That I would say that for anything.
Drums are like the most easy to get into instrument, I think, because you don't really even need a set. Like you can use sticks and pots and pans, like as every early childhood drummer will tell you. But you can start just keeping a beat, and you don't need a saxophone or a guitar or any sort of musical like harmonic or melodic knowledge. You just start with that 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, and that actually helps you with all of your other instruments. Just being able to keep a nice steady beat and have good rhythm.
Yeah, that's really what it's all about. It's just like rhythm, and I feel like drums are, I think the reason a lot of people like drums is because unlike a piano or like a keyboard that has like, you know, like all these little notes and buttons, it's very easy to be a lot more like, oh, a little bit, you know, a little bit scary. Like with drums are like pretty instantly gratifying. I mean, you'd have to be playing really poorly to make like a hit sound bad, unless you're just like hitting it on the side of the snare or something like well, I don't know, it doesn't sound right. But you know, yeah, it's
We
really
would
just
still
about,
sample that though, for sure.
yeah, yes, exactly. Throw a bunch of reverb on it. But yeah, like with drums, you know, like your first thing you hear is, you know, you have, you know, your right foot, you know, like, you know, if you can do that and then just like adding in like your right foot, like that's like the most basic thing. And it's kind of like the whole like tapping your head and like rubbing your belly sort of thing.
Right.
That's the main thing that you're trying to learn, is just like kind of like dividing these different rhythms and how to think about it to where you can play these little grooves and then just kind of build from there. Because once you get that kind of stuff internalized, then you can, you know, or like, and then like instead of just do, then you start to do, and then like you start playing with feel and dynamics and stuff, and then you're kind of off to the races. But it's all about just like starting very simple.
Yeah, separating your 2 hands and your 2 feet is very difficult.
Yeah,
You're
like the
not
thing,
used to doing things like with 1 foot while you're doing something else with your other hands.
yeah, like doing the whole kind of like more like subdividey sort of stuff, where you have like your left foot going the whole time while you're doing beats, and then kind of that sort of thing. Like that kind of stuff always threw me off because I never really practiced that. The, you know, the music we would always play, it was just usually pretty just like you're there on the hi-hat, you do a roll and hit some cymbals, and you're on the ride, or maybe you're riding on a cymbal or something like a crash, or you know, but like that's the kind of stuff that used to like kind of trip me up, where you just have like kind of like the pedal chick just going the whole time, like,
Yeah.
or like, you know, messing around with like ghost notes and stuff, like, because ghost, like people who can pull off like cool jazzy or like fusion drums with like, you know, little intricate like ghost notes in there, like when you listen to a recording session and you just solo out the snare like like that is a very awesome skill that can probably go underlooked, just because sometimes stuff like that can get buried in a mix. But like when you watch really good drummers who do that kind of stuff, it's just like you were saying, it's so musical and
Yeah.
like, yeah.
But I would say that's like very advanced. Like that's for people who've been playing, you know, 5-10 years or whatever. Whereas most people hopping on a drum set for the first time, it's all very foreign. And then you hit, like, let's say you hit the kick and you're like, oh, that sounds cool. And then you hit the snare and you're like, oh, that sounds cool. I've heard that before. And you close the hi-hat and you play the hi-hat, and these kind of things all one at a time, like your ear perks up because number one, it's super loud. And number two, it's like, I've heard this so many times before. And then just figuring out a way to keep a steady beat with just the kick and just the snare will go a long way. And then you can add other things on top of that, but it's the foundation of it is just keeping a steady beat. And so that's one of the reasons I really like playing with albums. Like very simple music. Like I played with a lot of Beatles, Reliant K, very simple 4 on the floor most of the time, like 4/4 stuff. And it wasn't trying to be Rush or Genesis or any crazy intricate music. This was all pretty simple, and that's where I would start, is just getting that kick in the right place, getting that snare in the right place, and then you can work your way up from there.
Yeah, it's just because I mean, with drums, it's all about being in the pocket, you know. I mean, stuff can be a little loose or have a little swing to it or whatever, but that's your goal. is like to be in time. Like you are the backbone of your band.
Yeah.
If you fall off the rails, you're taking everyone with you.
And we've all
That,
played with a drummer who wasn't great. Like we've all played with somebody who speeds up through the track or slows down through the track, and you get to the bridge, and you're like, how did we get to 105 BPM? We started at 120. Like it's painful, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's easy, especially, like, I mean, because the music I've always played live is more like extreme kind of stuff.
Not to brag.
No, well, it's not bragging because it's difficult. I wish I was just playing more fun stuff. This shit's too hard.
Yeah.
But it's very easy when you're playing stuff that is fast music for it to get faster, especially when you add some adrenaline and people in the crowd. It's like hey, you look back at the drummer like, hey, just take it down a little bit. Stuff can get a little uncontrollable, especially when you're playing in like the 240, 250 BPM kind of stuff.
Right.
Like especially the first band that I used to tour in, like it was always pretty fast, like in the 240s, 250s. So when you're like, and then it starts going even like, okay, that like this is the tempo that we set it to be. When stuff goes like 5-10 BPM faster, it's like, no, I can like, it's just not even fun anymore.
Right.
Or probably just sounds like what's going on, especially if that wasn't the intention. But yeah, just being in the pocket, that's like the best thing you can do. Like, and like you said, learning stuff that you're into, that's just chill. Cause like there's no need to like, all right, I want to be Neil Peart, I mean, there's nothing against that. If you're like, that's like my aspiration, like if I was like, man, I want to be Mike Mangini, he's like the drummer in Dream Theater now, like those types of guys who are just like crazy machines. But then reverse engineer that and be like, how do I get to that point, without just like making me want to give up.
Right.
And like my feet can't do that, or like I can't play rolls that fast, because it's like when you think of the comparison, like I always tried to compare learning an instrument or anything to something I've already done. I've done this with music stuff. I've done this with other skill sets, and breaking it down in a way to where it's easier to kind of like not overwhelm yourself. Like I think of like rudiments, like playing chromatic warm-up scales, like it's just like it's just fundamental things that you do for just kind of keeping the ligaments sharp. It's like that's not the fun stuff. You don't want to sit there all day. But I would try to start doing that, like basic, like right left rudiments, or like right left right left right left right, or like right left left that sort of thing. And just little different things, because you can apply all that sort of stuff to to musical ideas. But it's just kind of being able to practice that kind of stuff and be able to have those movements under your belt. And you can get crazy, and there's so many different types of rudimentary type things for drumming. But
and having experience with the beat and with the rhythm and being comfortable living in that environment also makes you a better musician overall. Like if you look at famous singers, you got Dave Grohl, you got Phil Collins, you got Ringo Starr, Anderson .Paak, like I mentioned. Stevie Wonder actually plays really good drums.
Oh, cool.
So there's like so many people who are also like can sing or can play guitar because they understand the fundamental foundation of rhythm. And so like just translating that from knowing where the downbeat is also can help you with like a strumming pattern on your guitar.
Yeah. And the great thing about learning drums, I mean, this goes the same, especially for like we talked about with, people who learn how to put together orchestral music. Like that's way more knowledge that you need to have to even put something like that together versus like learning drums. Because like I would always recommend for anyone who's a musician learning drums, at least basic drum stuff, because that stuff, when you understand how even just like basic drumming works, and just limitations, like of course you can't hit like 3 cymbals and 2 toms at the same time. Like if you program that, someone's probably gonna be very upset with you. But like just basic stuff, because like I started learning drums. The whole reason why I started like really trying to like learn and perform drums, like before it was just like I had basic stuff that I could do from just like jamming covers and stuff with friends. but like actually really trying to like play like more like faster death metal stuff, which is like more of the stuff that I was getting into. I was like watching a lot of videos from like Flo Monnier from this band called Cryptopsy, Derek Roddy, he's another death metal drummer, and just trying to learn that sort of thing. But then I discovered the whole world of drum programming, and I was
Right.
like, so I don't need to learn how to play this stuff and record it in order to like write my own music. And that was kind of a game changer for me. Like, I don't know how you were like when all of a sudden like, what, you can like get these like really cool drum sounds and make your own music. And of course, like when you first start, everything's at like 127. There's no dynamics, and you're just like, you don't really know what you're quite doing yet. But like all that time I spent learning drums, I instantly was able to apply it to drum programming, because
Right.
like, okay, like I want to do this type of groove, or like, like in death metal, there's like, they call them like bomb blasts, where it's like basically like double bass, digga, 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 and the snares on the, tactu, katu, 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 like the first, like
Gotcha.
basically, yeah, like on your right foot, you're always going to play a snare. Just sounds super punishing. But then like there's like different types of ones where it's kind of like a skank beat, but played really fast, like where the kick and snare are alternating. So it's like once you kind of like learn these different grooves, or different things, or even just listening to drummers and being like, oh, okay, like trying to like, dissect that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I didn't really take the time to learn drums, that process would have probably felt a little bit more like, oh, because you're like, how do I go about programming drums? Like what would they do? I mean, everyone listens to music with drums, but that doesn't necessarily mean everyone programs drums
Yeah.
properly. So I would always suggest, even like if you're any kind of musician who does stuff in the studio, like programming or learning drums to be able to program them more accurately, I think is definitely worth doing. And especially like when you learn different types of grooves, or experimenting with different types of grooves on other types of music, because I think it's very easy to like start programming and it just sounds kind of basic, but like experimenting with other types of grooves on riffs, like that's the thing I started finding really fun with
Mm-hmm.
like working on my own music, is like, oh, like what if I tried this, drum groove? Because it's like when you're trying to explain drums to a drummer, sometimes there could be a little bit of like a language barrier with like, go like boots to
Yeah. It's a lot
like,
of mouth noises.
yeah, it's like when you're a guitar player and you're like jan jin jin like, okay, like jan jin jin weep, what,
Yeah.
but I'm I'm sure you've experienced that being in bands, like the band talk, but it's not like, oh, play the on the fourth measure, like we didn't do that. It was just like do the jung jung.
I don't know about you, but I play the virtual drums in live just to a click, and
Mm-hmm.
that helps a lot with playing like a real drummer. Like you're not going to play 10 toms at once, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll go back and do overdubs of like, okay, here's a fill, or we're going to change this measure to keep it interesting and not make it mundane. But
Mm-hmm.
I always start out playing to a click and just playing my keyboard keys or using the machine micro,
Mm-hmm.
and having some sort of drum pads is really fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool because like you don't. I mean, there's some really great finger drummers out there, like
Yeah.
Dom Segalis. He's one of those guys. Like I've seen some other ones as well, where like they can just like perform that kind of stuff in really well. I mean, because the cool thing is you can build on each time, like you were saying, like first pass,
Right.
and just getting like the solid like piece by piece kind of thing, and then just, and that way it kind of isn't just like hard quantized, and or if you need to nudge stuff a little bit, you can, or then later on you can go in and like do a pass of like dynamics to oh, I kind of hit this one a little bit harder, but it makes it a little bit more more of a performance than
Yeah.
just like clicking in all the notes, because then after that, then you still got to go through and like then adjust all the dynamics, unless you
Mhm.
have some kind of macro that's like set up to like make it to where each drum hit is like randomized, or like velocity is randomized between like 115 and 122 or something like that, to where like, oh, okay, like you don't have to go in and do all that, or then randomize all the so I mean, there are some things you can do to kind of speed up that process, but that's definitely a fun way to do it. That's a little bit more performance. Like it's like I always like playing in percussion libraries, like anytime I'm like performing some kind of more like epic or cinematic kind of drum stuff with like ape or something, like I like
Yeah.
playing it in, even if I got to go back and tweak it, I like being a little, programming the stuff in, because if you're just everything was just like click click click, or
Yeah, drawing stuff.
yeah, I mean sometimes that's cool too, if especially if you're just like it I know this is going to be all quantized, you could just be like do 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 do, all right, highlight all that, just like duplicate it like 8 times, and then like start adding other drums or whatever. But yeah, I think that's a fun way to do things. Even if it seems like it takes a little bit longer, it probably will still save you time, because at least like you're kind of getting the performance in there. It feels a little bit more natural, more like a drummer.
Yeah, it's more authentic. And a lot of the times, if you played a decent performance, you might not quantize it 100%. So it might be 70% quantized, or the hi hats might be a little behind. And you actually want that oftentimes.
Yeah, or I mean, because there are some times where drummers don't play quantized.
Right. Robots.
You should probably never have quantized drums. I mean, there's cool stuff that you can do in Cubase, where you can have these like MIDI modifiers.
Here comes the Cubase commercial.
Look, man, I've been trying to get you on Cubase for a long time now. Well, for those of you who do use Cubase, there's probably stuff like this in other DAWs too, but there's these cool MIDI modifiers where, especially if you're doing like percussion stuff, you can have everything like quantized to the grid, but then you can set these like randomizers to where it'll like kind of shift the hits a little bit, like forwards and backwards.
Nice.
So you can keep it all quantized, but it will play back a little bit looser, which is pretty cool. Like, and that's a way of like, if your workflow is you like to quantize stuff and have it nice and clean and tidy and all that, you can do that while not sacrificing any kind of like playback where it's a little bit sterile and kind of
Yeah.
this feels a little too robotic or something. So that's a cool way to get around that too.
The machine has a nudge feature, and I think it's nudge like 10% at a time, or maybe it's adjustable, but you can just, instead of, nudge by a 30-second note or a 16th note, it's like just a tiny bit. And then you can play each of those back. And that's how like the Dilla beats kind of work. Is like he was playing like an analog sampler and playing hi-hats in like that. But if you're trying to achieve that sound, you got to get certain hi-hats to be behind.
Yeah, I have some like little macro things where it nudges like -5 and +5 ticks.
Okay.
So it'll just kind of, if here's the grid and it's like right here, it'll just be like go or just like slightly off in either direction, and it's all random. So so that's a pretty cool way to like instantly kind of get a little bit of loose stuff too. Yeah, because like you'll see, if you've been in the studio and you're working with drummers, sometimes they play ahead, sometimes they play a little behind, and then if you like highlight all their stuff and then just like shift it up, like it's like, oh, now it's all perfect. Like I mean, even with like recording guitar, like you'll see like, oh, I'm playing that a little too fast, or
Yeah.
Or I'm anticipating this thing a little too quick, or so it's like I don't like to quantize drums really, because it's like no one really plays like that, unless, I mean, it depends, unless you're doing like some kind of very dense trailer kind of music or something, and everything has to be like
To the frame.
Yeah, like everything has to be tight, like when, and then also from a production standpoint, like when there's a lot of like big impacty drums, like when stuff's slightly off, like you can hear it. It'll start to sound a little like clustered.
Yeah. The other side of that coin is you want things to be a little bit off. You don't want things to hit exactly the same moment for impacts like that, because it'll actually sound bigger if they're a little bit separated. Like if the high trebly stuff, like stingers, are just like a little later than the bass low sub stuff. So, I mean, we're talking like fractions of a second, but
yeah,
tiny amounts. But if they're hitting at the exact same point, it can actually sound smaller.
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's where I guess it comes into like the types of sounds that you're using. Like if you're using like too many low end drums and then like one smaller higher impact thing, or also like how you program the drums too, with like big hits on like the one doom, and then like doom, and then like more higher drums, kind of like
Yeah.
it's like you don't usually tend to do like the bigger low end drums, like it's
Constant.
just like you're just like, what the hell is going on? Like, so it's like finding that kind of. It's funny when I interviewed Jason Graves on the podcast. He was one of the first or second people that I interviewed on there, and since he's a drummer, he was talking about how he used his drum concepts for even programming like orchestral stuff,
Okay.
like thinking of like the kick is kind of like the cellos and the basses, the snares or it's kind of like the viola, and then like the hi-hats is kind of like the violins, so if you're like dun 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 dun, dun, or then or
Okay.
like
Okay.
like dun, 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 like, and I was just like, oh, that's pretty interesting, like kind of going back to like what I was saying about the whole like applying new things to stuff that
Yeah.
and I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a really cool idea. And I was even thinking like that would be interesting to like apply that sort of concept to like drum grooves and like writing orchestral stuff around it. I was like, oh, that'd be kind of an interesting sort of musical writer block hack or something. Like, I don't know really what to do, listen to some cool drummers and then maybe try to like write some sort of orchestral thing based off of like one of your favorite drum grooves and just kind of like, because there's no musical aspects to the drums. So that's where it's like, it's more rhythm.
Yeah.
And then from there kind of like applying the types of notes or what chord or progression, just like from what comes from that. I was like, oh, that's a pretty interesting concept.
Get some serialism basically going on.
Pretty much, yeah.
I like it.
Rhythmic serialization.
Next library coming out soon.
Just a bunch of cereal thrown at your face.
All right.
Or just like thrown at your speakers. I don't know.
So the reason we're talking about drums today is we just released David Oliver's drum kit. And this is a deeply sampled, we're talking 5 different mic positions, deeply sampled vintage drum kit that is great for rock and jazz and pop. And I would use it on soul stuff. I did a demo using it that is kind of jazzy, and it was just using a virtual Rhodes, and I played some live bass on it, and then I just programmed David Oliver's drum kit, and it turned out really nice. Just some good old vintage verb on there, and so it's like a trio, like a jazz trio. And then Craig, I know you have a rock track coming out.
Yeah, I'm gonna be releasing probably at the time that this podcast is out, it'll be on our YouTube channel. I'm doing another Soundiron session on like writing like a modern rock style track, because a lot of the demos, there was a lot of like there's some, David's was really cool. Is this really like kind of funky track?
Yep.
And then you had that kind of more like chill jam band vibe, with the Dusty Rhodes on it and stuff. And so I was like, oh, it'd be kind of fun to do something a little bit in the rock style. I was like going for very like, when you watch a lot of like reality shows, like I don't know if you've ever seen like Rest Valley Restorers and like what is it, Car Masters, but like when you watch all these, or like when you're watching, like it's funny, one of our coworkers, when I posted the track, he was like built Ford tough. Yeah, and it's totally that, like just like
totally a car commercial.
Car like like you hear that stuff everywhere when you like, if you watch those kinds of shows, or if it's like mechanics or even like probably like if you watch shows like Forged in Fire, or like anything that's got like a little bit of or like barbecue shows, they'll probably have all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, you hear it a lot in like kind of like reality TV. So yeah, I'm going to be breaking that down. It's in the SoundCloud playlist if anyone wants to check it out. But yeah, that video will be out probably by the time this podcast comes out, and it was a fun one. There's some cool mixing stuff in there that I haven't gotten to really show off because just kind of never came up. So it'll be hopefully fun and educational for you guys. And yeah.
So if someone wants to kind of reverse engineer their favorite drummer and try to program some drums, where would you start?
I would just start by watching live videos of the drummer. I mean, that I'm a very visual kind of person. I mean, I would say visually, I like to start there for learning things, just so you're not kind of going in blind, I guess. I mean, you can listen to stuff and figure it out, like some people are better at that than others when it comes to like first getting into, some people, like when they were kids, they can hear Beatles tunes on the radio and then, oh, they have a piano, and just kind of figure it out. But I feel like watching people, it's way easier because especially if you don't know how a drum set is set up, or you're not really too familiar with like how their drum set is set up, because some people can have, you know, hi-hats on the right side, like, and it's, you know, so maybe they might be like hitting a closed hi-hat with their right hand and doing like pedal chicks on their left foot, and then you're like, wait, how are they doing that? That doesn't make sense. So watching drummers is a great way, because you can just completely dissect it. I mean, if you're on YouTube, just slow it down. Just
Nice.
go to the settings, and you know, if they're doing too many like crazy things, or it seems a little too like hard to follow right away, just go in and like slow it down, and you can like watch. Because even like with like learning guitar, just learning how to play an instrument, it goes way deeper than that, especially, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when it comes to like the mechanics of things.
Hmm.
Like not everything is as like clearly laid out as it seems. Like, oh, like they hold a pick and they go turn. That's it goes way deeper than that, because like, especially if you ever watch like there's this dude, he has a YouTube channel where he does a lot of like breaking down of like guitar picking mechanics.
Oh yeah.
And he talks about like pick slanting and stuff like that. And like he'll put a camera like right up in like where they're picking and like slow it down, and you'll see like, you know, how the wrist plays, you
I've
know,
watched
how,
that
yeah,
channel. It's
like,
crazy.
yeah, like how far your pick sticks out, like do you angle it? And the same thing for drummers, you know, like if you have like, you know, there's like what is it, like French grip and traditional. Traditional is more like the side stick, right? And French grip's more
Besides,
like
like
the,
match grip
yeah,
is, yeah, the same.
yeah. So like even that sort of thing, because like, you know, if you watch guys like Jojo Mayer, who's a fucking amazing drummer, you know, like they'll be like, it's not like you just stiffen your arm and just go like this, like, ta, you know, like there's like wrist, you know, like, or
Yeah.
like you'll see guys that are like, ta, 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 like they'll like use their fingers to pull in, or like, ta, 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 you know, so you might be like hearing someone playing really quick, and you're like, I can't do it like that playing, you know, how I normally play.
Right.
So then you watch that video and you see, oh, well, he's doing this like push pull technique where he's using his fingers, or it's more
Hmm.
just all finger, like and you just see their fingers moving, but their wrist and forearm are doing nothing. Or if they're doing like the gravity stuff, or like the more kind of what is that called? That I think there's like a more technical term for it when you do that kind of like one-handed roll thing on a snare, you know. But you might hear someone going like like how are they doing like a drum roll that sounds like it's two hands, but then they're like hitting cymbals and doing all the stuff with their feet. So best way to start is just watch what people are doing. Like I think drums are very visual, and it helps to watch. I mean, and honestly with anything really, it's like seeing how people do it, I think kind of demystifies it a little bit more than what you could be thinking it looks like in your own mind.
Yeah. I would say getting the basics, watching another drummer is easier than watching a guitarist if you know nothing about either instrument, because you're
Yeah.
just seeing these big movements, and it's like very primal physical
Hmm.
action of slamming the snare. I would definitely recommend starting with simple music, and there's of course listicles and YouTube channels and all that stuff to help you, but like an example one is Another One Bites the Dust. So like
Hmm.
that's a song that you could start out with, because the drum beat kind of stays the same through the whole song, and it's pretty consistent, and it's not too fast, and it also really helps to play along with songs that you already know well. And when you add your own drums to on top of it, you'll learn new things about the song, but you already have heard this song hundreds of times, and that'll help you.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to kind of like improv and ad lib on stuff that you know what's coming,
Yeah, exactly.
especially if it's another one bites the dust. It's just doom, 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 doom. Then you like then just get all Mike Mangini on it. And just
You always take it full expert mode, huh?
no, only in my mind, not in reality. In
Right,
reality,
right, right.
I would just end up probably just doing some BS on it, or I probably would just keep it simple and not look like a jackass.
Yeah, you don't want to get fired from the gig, man.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not even a drummer. I'll fire myself.
So with David Oliver's drum kit, we added a brand new mixer section that we've never put in another library, as well as a brand new fancy effects rack that comes with all of Contact's newer Contact 6 plugins. Some
Mhm.
really nice effects. I really like the newer reverbs and delays
Yeah,
in Contact. The stock stuff is really nice.
yeah. I really like using those. Yeah, especially like some of the other like newer effects. It's like it's stuff that you've seen in in our effects tracks, but just updated, looks cooler, sounds cool, a nice effects track upgrade.
Yep.
But for anyone who wants to learn more about David Oliver drum kit, just head over to soundiron.com. And on the product page, we got a bunch of cool videos. We have, like Nathan mentioned, his composing video, which is really cool and showing it in a different way. We also have some videos of David Oliver talking about his drum kit. It's a Pearl DLX that he's had for like 30 years. So if these drums could talk, they'd probably have a lot to say.
Got some stories.
Yeah, they got some stories. Have Morgan Freeman do some voiceover for it. But yeah, like it's just a really cool drum kit that's super versatile and with that vintage sound that a lot of people like to use, because it is a vintage kit. So it's got a lot of like really cool sounds that you can kind of work with it in a few different ways. So the video that I'm going to be putting out, it's going to be showing it in a little bit more of a rock context. I'm going to show some of the mixing stuff I did to kind of use it in a little bit more of a rock context. Like, so that's what I thought was really cool about it, is that it's very versatile and just has, a sound of its own. And it's still on intro sale. So if anyone wants to pick it up and get it while it's on intro, and yeah, and just check it out. Listen to all the demos. Like there were so many really cool demos that were some of my favorites.
Definitely range in genre. And with the mic positions, like the kick, for example, you have the main close mic, and then you have a top mic, a bottom mic, and then you have the overhead position, and then you have the room position. So, and you can mix and match with this mixer that I was talking about. You can mix and match all of these positions and dial in the width. And I mean, it's very, it's intuitive and simple to use, but you can really dial in your own tone and your own sound from the drum set.
Yeah, like the last thing I want to mention that I really liked about it is the stereo channel with the TLM 103s. I mean, it's cool that you have that option of kind of getting a little bit more of that classic sound with the top and bottom snare mics, but those stereo pairs with the TLM 103s, like miking it in stereo, it's like some of my favorite types of miking I've ever heard, because it just sounds so wide. Yeah. So like full range. You're using these, one of those mics on there would have sounded great, but hearing like two recorded, in a more close stereo position, just like going back and forth. I just always tended to favor using the stereo mics just because I just loved the sound of them. I really liked how they came out.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah.
So as far as things to recommend this week, I'll let you think about it while I recommend a couple things. Okay. I have been watching The Terminalist on Amazon Prime, which is starring Chris Pratt as a Navy SEAL commander. And it's crazy to see the glow up of Chris Pratt from Andy Dwyer, Parks and Rec, to Guardians of the Galaxy, to doing whatever he wants, basically. But it's a really good show. If you like psychological thrillers, anything like that, where, there's lots of action sequences and also kind of a story with twists and turns.
Yeah, I've actually been watching this show called The Unexplained. I think it's on Netflix with William Shatner. Oh, and yeah, it's just they just talk about all these like different creepy things, like the Winchester house and
nice.
What was there was some like that forest in Japan, the suicide forest, like they were talking about that, like just anything that's just unusual and creepy. If anyone who's seen our EVP Patrol Squad, video, paranormal, we love that kind of stuff. Recommendations, I would say check out, since this is a drum episode, like check out Mike Johnston's YouTube channel. Honestly, like if any of you out there are like getting bit by the bug a little bit to want to learn some drums, feeling drummy after listening to this, he has a ton of really great instructional stuff on there. I mean, there's plenty of that kind of content out there, but his channel is really good. He makes very difficult or sometimes difficult concepts very easily digestible, and he has a cool personality and great video production, and everything sounds good. So I would definitely give that a view. And yeah,
I would say if you want to check out some sick drumming, watch Anderson .Paak on the Tiny Desk, NPR Tiny Desk from like maybe 2016. It has millions of views on it, and it is disgusting. It's so sick.
Check out some gospel chops.
There you go.
That's all. That's all I can recommend. Yeah, just go get your mind blown. Watch that guy that Nathan has recommended, and then just go on YouTube and just type in 5-year-old kid shreds on the drums, and then you just never want to play drums in your whole life.
Those don't inspire me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they just make me punch my computer screen, you bastard.
All right. On that note, we have a very special guest coming on the pod next week, so you need to subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Yeah. I know you're thinking about it, so just go ahead and do it.
Yeah. If you listen, just subscribe. What else you got going on?
Right.
Smash it. Smash that sub.
I think that's all. So if you like this episode, let us know. We'll talk about other instruments, talk about other famous musicians. I got more film composer breakdowns coming. So on that note, we'll call it here. All right. Check out David Oliver's drum kit. And Craig, I will catch you next week.
All righty.
Peace. Peace.